Good morning, and welcome to Monday Morning Business Foreplay. Today we have Shannon Simmons, and she's going to be our guest speaker. She's going to talk to us about her business, Fit for Profit, and share her story with us. Very interesting story that she has, and I'm excited for each of you to get the opportunity to meet her. We are going to get a little bit more personable, I think. Before we do that, Shannon, I want to give you a minute to share a little bit about your life and what brought you to this point in your business with our audience.
My goodness. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Colleen, and people that are here live. It's fun to be here. I'm excited to be here. And it's always better when there are people live and on camera and interacting. So I'm excited for this time together. I mean, I'm in my mid 40s. So what brought me to this point in, I don't know, 2 minutes or less? That's a big story. But there's a lot, obviously, that goes into it. But I would just say I grew up in a house that didn't talk about money. And at some point, that all of a sudden became really uncomfortable for me. And I decided to change it. And my business is Fit for Profit. Basically, we do profit coaching, profit strategy work, and accounting services for other small businesses. And I don't really know why. I chalk it up to serendipity, universe, God, whatever you want to call that higher being. When I was about 16 years old, I was like, I want to be an accountant. And I really had no business being an accountant and trying to talk to anybody else about money. I just told you my parents never talked to me about money, but I thought it sounded cool, I guess. And I'm one of those rare people that actually am still doing in my mid 40s what I thought I was going to be doing at 16. That doesn't usually happen, especially now. But 30 years later, the role of accountant in my life now looks very different than what it did in my mind at 16. Obviously, have learned a lot and really gotten comfortable talking about money and done a lot of work around that family of origin that actually probably did interact with money, obviously, regularly, and had quote unquote conversations. It was more like arguments in my family of origin growing up around money. And now I can see how that affected so much of my life, especially my early marriage and my early days in business and trying to do a lot of it on my own because I didn't want to bring that energy of tense and argumentative expectations to conversations around money. And so I was able to do that with clients and then figured out that I could do that for myself and then also really just love doing the accounting work and helping other businesses also get comfortable with money, no matter what your story is, whether it's similar to mine or, I mean, there's a variation for everybody, right? So whatever your story is, how is that affecting how you deal with money now? And then actually giving you some strategies and systems that you can put in place to maybe give your nervous system a little bit of a break so it doesn't have to deal with all of those things, or it can deal with it while you actually do the healing that needs to happen. So that's a little bit about how I've gotten to where I am now.
I love that, Shannon, and I feel like it's so important to know that about you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Coleen Stubbs. I'm the founder of Simplified CEO Systems. I have been building businesses for 37 years. This is my ninth business. I have built them from concept to profit, sold the first 8 for profit. This is my ninth business. And in short, I simplify, go high level, teaching midlife entrepreneurs how to build businesses that work when they're not working. So I love what you said about money. And like you said, everybody has a different story. My story is totally different. I was raised in a very financially responsible home. Money was only spoken of as a tool. We were taught to, if you want to be rich, pretend like you're poor. If you want to be poor, pretend like you're rich. And when I say taught, it wasn't lip service. It was my mom buying cereal by the bags and putting it in little Tupperware containers instead of ever buying boxed cereal, right? And I remember every detail of this conversation with my mom going to Publix in South Florida. And I was probably about 9. And the gentleman in front of us was checking out and he had Doritos and he had steaks and he had all the junk food and all the stuff. And I was just like, wow, I love that. I want that. Mom, can we get? And my mom was like, no, no, no. And we went out to the parking lot and he was out loading his groceries. And he was loading his groceries into bins. And we were loading our groceries into my dad's little Pinto that was tricolored. It was red, white, and blue. So at least we were patriotic, right? But my dad had different accidents. And instead of turning things in on the insurance, he paid for them for the repairs. And that included, or he made them himself, and that included buying parts from the junkyard. So our car was red, white, and blue. Now, mind you, I'm almost drooling watching this guy, his car, the money he obviously had. My mom says, I want to show you something, sis, because you seem like you really like that. I was like, I do. Like, that's my goals in life. And she's like, watch this. And so we drove to the other side of the tracks, followed this guy home to his clapboard house. And my mom said, you see the differences? And I was scared. I was petrified. Why was I in this neighborhood? I'd never been in such a dark and dirty neighborhood in my life. And she's like, if you want to be rich, pretend like you're poor. And we drove home to the upper class, to our big home that was paid for. And we ate our cereal out of Tupperware containers. And my mother and father never were late on a bill, were never financially irresponsible, even till the day that they died. And we were taught the same thing. If you want something, work hard for it, and then pretend like you're poor. Always work ahead. Once you save something, I was taught, once you save it, forget it, forget it. So if you pay off a piece of land or a home, forget that it has any monetary value. Let's leave that aside and just focus on making more money and using it as a tool to get ahead. And so I think that even saying that I was raised in that situation, which obviously is a true blessing, I don't have a lot of tools for how to do things. And so I'm excited to sit down with you, Shannon, because I think that the tools and the tips you're going to give us are going to encompass everybody in the financial world. And I think that it's about time we start talking about money. You know, as a kid, we saw people in different situations, but not so much talk about finances, not so much sit down and budget and things like that. And so I'm excited to learn how we can all get a profit off of our business and how we can actually set our business up to not only give us that profit, but give us the confidence boost in knowing that our business is doing well enough that we are able to pay ourselves, even if it's a small amount. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Shannon, and let you share with us all your expertise and secrets.
Awesome. My gosh, Coleen, you just touched on so many different little things that we can start to talk about. And it's so interesting, the story you share. And I also have two sisters, and I don't know, Coleen, if you have any siblings, but I find it very fascinating to sometimes talk to people in sibling groups, or specifically like my siblings. Like I told you my story and a little bit of how that got integrated into who I became. My sisters were in the exact same household and lived in the exact same circumstances and walked away with very different life perspectives, let's say. And so that integrated in very different ways, which I always think is fascinating, because what I've learned is it really doesn't matter if you came from a house that had a lot of, let's say, material things, or if you came from a house that didn't, you know, Coleen, whichever one of those houses that you saw that day, you can come away with that with either an abundance or a scarcity mindset. It really doesn't matter. It just depends on how it gets integrated. And so I often will talk to business owners about what are your goals, right? What are your goals for your business, and how do we set up systems in your business? Specifically, I'm talking about cash flow systems or financial systems that help you get towards those goals. Because it really doesn't matter to me what your goals are. It doesn't matter if your goal is to live in, you know, 1,200 square foot home and take 12 weeks of vacation every month or every year. Sorry, 12 weeks every month doesn't work. 12 weeks every year. Or if it's to live in, you know, a 12,000 square foot mansion and never leave home. But those could look very different in your financial systems, right? Like, what are we naming accounts? Because that really matters, because then it helps you to know that you're working towards those goals. So I also talk a lot about choices. Like, everything you're doing is a choice, right? So Coleen, your mom was making a choice to do cereal out of Tupperware so that she could give you that house that she wanted, and somebody else wanted steaks instead of the house, right? It's all about choices. And that's why I love to really get to know business owners and understand, like, what are your goals and dreams? Obviously, we want a profitable business, but what does that profit look like? What does that profit fund then in your business? And then one of the ways, the most important way we do that is setting up multiple bank accounts in people's businesses. Because most people, again, whether you come from an abundance mindset or a scarcity mindset, don't like checking your bank accounts every day, don't even have the time. Like, maybe you have more important things. I actually argue you do have more important things to do than check your bank accounts every day, stress out about money every day, all of that. So if you have a system in place that includes multiple bank accounts, so that every time you get $1 into your business, you put it in those bank accounts, you know that it's working for you, you can kind of set it and forget it. And you don't have to think about money so frequently. And when you do, Coleen mentioned earlier, you have this immense amount of confidence now, because again, we can take that profit bank account and we can rename it to Dream House or Dream Vacation or whatever it is. And you can see money start to accumulate in that account. And then
I want to interrupt you. I really love the concept of the different bank accounts with different names. It reminds me of the cash flow system, the envelope system.
Yep.
Have you seen that? So kind of
Yes.
like that, but on a bank account level, we let's dive into these account names a little bit more. So just in general, I know you're not saying a specific business, but what would these names look like? Like, are we naming one for bills? Are we naming one for bills that we pay annually? Is it like just, I need some new jeans? What does that look like?
Yeah. So, yes, there are 5 or 6 basic accounts that we recommend every business owner have, and they're pretty general. So, yeah, let's dig into that. And I was going to say too, Coleen, this system was modeled off of the envelope system and it was modernized into bank accounts. And then I feel like the envelope system, I grew up with it. I can still picture the brown box that my mom had all the envelopes in. But I never made the leap that that same thing could apply to business, right? So when I found this system, I was like, oh, this has just been kind of transformed into business and modernized with bank accounts. So what are the bank accounts? The first one you need is an income account. You need a place for all of those deposits to sit and wait for the day that you're going to allocate them to all the other accounts. Because if it goes into another account, you'll end up spending it before you get it allocated. So the income account just serves like the serving tray, and then you're going to pay into all the other ones from there. The other thing that's important to know about the income account, earlier I said I don't want you doing this every single day. When you're getting started, you may need to check your income account every day and make allocations into all the other accounts. The goal is that you're doing that like on a Monday, on a Money Monday or a Finance Friday, or maybe you pick the 10th and 25th or whatever days of the month work for you. But we gradually get to that point from the income account. The second account that you need, first one you're going to allocate into, is profit. I mean, the whole system is called Profit First. We want you allocating into that account the very first thing you do. At the beginning, it may be 1% that you're allocating into profit. It doesn't have to be a big dollar amount, but just enough to get you in the habit of paying yourself first and taking a little bit of money out of your operating expense account, basically, into profit. The third account then that you're going to allocate to is your tax accounts. When you become profitable in your business, when you are profitable, you are going to have to pay taxes. We're going to do everything we can to minimize that, but we still want you to be ready to pay taxes on April 15th. That's really what started me in Profit First. I had a tax bill that I couldn't pay, and that sucks as an accountant, especially. It sucks as any business owner, but especially as an accountant. And so I'm really adamant that my clients all have a tax account so that they're ready for April 15th or quarterly taxes whenever you have to pay those. And then the third account that you're going to allocate into, the fourth account you need, is your owner's pay account. This is where you are taking a salary from your business. You are getting something paid on a consistent basis from your business income into your personal bank accounts. I don't care if it's weekly or monthly or every other week, whatever it is. And I don't care if it's $100. It's something consistent that is happening from your business into your personal finances to help you, again, start to gain that confidence that your business can pay your personal bills and that you can pay your personal bills from the income you have from your business. And then the last account, the fifth account, is your operating expense account. This is where you pay all of those bills from. So yes, Coleen, we do have a bills pay account. Basically, it's your operating expense account. You're going to have less in that account after you've allocated to all the others than you did last month, but that's the only way to get profitable, is to spend less than what you're generating in your business. And then we do have some more advanced accounts. They're really just sub accounts kind of your operating expense account. If you have a team or payroll or other people in your business that you're paying, that would be a sub account of operating expenses. Some people do it right out of operating expenses. Some people have a sub account. Just because, Coleen, you mentioned annual expenses, that is an account that we work with our clients to have. If you have a lot of expenses that you're only paying once a year, just like taxes, that can be really surprising and can be a huge hit to your cash flow. And so you can get a huge discount if you pay some of your subscriptions annually, but we actually want to act as if you're paying it monthly, divide that over 12 and put it into your annual expense account. It just eases the cash flow. And then when that bill comes due, you just pay it right out of your annual expense account and you're all prepared for it. No big deal. So
I love
those
all of that,
are,
Shannon.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So I like the owner's pay. I want to touch on that for a second. At one point in my long life, we had rental properties. We had 22 monthly rentals, and I was in charge of managing them. But what I really wanted to do was go to work because I like the finer things in life. And we were in partnership with my parents. So it was my husband and I and my parents. And we put so much money in an account for repairs each month. I don't remember if it was 10 or 15, so much money in a different account for taxes. But then I got paid, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but please remember it was 25 years ago. I got paid $300 a month to manage the businesses, and that was the only pay that came out for anybody was me. But I loved knowing that on the second of the month I got $300. And you know what I did is I went to the mall and bought some of the finer things I wanted. And 25 years ago you could do that with $300. But that was like my fun day, and it really did make it worth working the rest of the month. Even though it was such a small amount, it really made it fun for me, and I loved having that opportunity. And so I would agree, really paying yourself is hugely important. Even if it's a small amount, it does make a big difference in how you feel about your business. And then the next thing I love that you really talked about is that keep your expenses lower than what you're making. And I think that a lot of people are like, I can't do that because I'm not making anything yet. Then you have to really just jump and start making money. You've got to push yourself to make that money, because in life, to get ahead, I know that there's a general saying that's like spend 10% less than you make. And that's a really good starting point. But I feel like all of our goals should be to spend 35% less than we make on everything, all
Absolutely
inclusive.
agree.
And that's a
35%.
long-term goal, but I feel like it should be one. John, I see that you have a question. Please step up.
Not so much a question, but I just wanted to throw some insight. In my business, I see this a lot with people doing kind of what you're doing, but they're sitting with significant money in all these different checking accounts earning 0.01% interest. They're in essence losing money. So if you're going to have this money sit, it could be something in a money market or a treasury account. Even with same day liquidity, we are earning 2-3%. If it's further time, I'm going to pay my taxes in a year. You can get into further accounts that, tie up some of your liquidity, but now you could be earning 5, 6, 7%. And, come year end, depending on the amount of this money, this could be thousands of dollars that you're earning that you wouldn't have earned, and the money was just sitting there and in essence losing money on your money. The envelope thing, sure, back then when no one really paid any real interest rate, okay, I can make my money sit in an envelope. But now you can really earn money, interest on your money. There's no point in having it sit in an envelope just collecting dust.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I saw the question from Ashley in the chat that was, do you recommend all the accounts under the same bank or at different banks? And for exactly the point John was making, most of the time, profit and tax at least should be at a separate bank, like a high yield savings where you're getting that 4 or 5 or 6% interest, because they do accumulate money the whole year long. We might take money out of them quarterly, but even then, like that profit account, we want to leave a cushion in it for that oh shit fund. So it should have quite a bit of money in it. And we want to be making sure that we're getting interest on it, because John's absolutely right. Having it sit in a checking account is losing money. That's just like the envelope. And that's why we've modernized it with bank accounts.
And then I'm going to step up and play devil's advocate. And I'm going to say that for somebody that had a business during 9/11, that I suggest having X amount of cash on hand for multiple reasons. Number one, not just the 911. There are other instances where you need that, where you need quick access to it. And so I do suggest that. We had a 100-year flood in town, and I had a boutique downtown. And because I did have my oh shit cash sitting aside and was able to continue paying employees even then my business was shut down, because I had a boutique and we got 5 inches of water through the entire boutique, but getting the water out was one issue. Paying to get the water out was one issue. Raising the floor, adding rain gutters to prevent this from happening again. And I was able to take my employees and have them come work on our farm and still pay them as if they were working at the boutique. The trickiest part was that we're talking about boutique women coming out and weeding the fence line and coming out and painting things. That was the trickiest part, was getting them to know how to do these things that I could provide them to do. But what happened is these are women that were single moms. And so as all the businesses around me closed down, and were literally closed for 3 and 4 months, and their employees just got no money, I was able to keep my employees in business. And it was the 3-month mark when FEMA made it out to my building, and they said, we're here to help your employees. And I said, I think you should go next door and help them and help their employees, because I put myself financially in a position where I was able to keep us going and just switch them from one location out to our farm. And then once we got the things done here, bring them back to work. And so I think you need to have some cash on hand, because you don't know what's coming. And it needs to be enough that I don't know if you want to say 1 month, 2 months, 3 months to cover so that you can run, whether it's a government shutdown or a government thing that you can't get to your funds, or it's an act of God or whatever. Maybe you're sick. That's another part of the money thing, is that I actually went on vacation to Vegas and my employees called and asked if they could have payroll. And that was my oh shit moment. I was like, nah, because I'm in Vegas. Luckily, I'm small town enough. I was able to call the bank and say, hey, send me some paperwork so I can add somebody to my bank account so they can go and make payroll. And I was able to do that, but also having somebody else that can have control, or at least limited control, or control over the correct accounts. I think that is also important. I see Carl has a question. Carl, where'd you go?
Well, you kind of covered it. In my previous life, I was a financial planner, and I always suggested people have we call it a what if account or a Murphy's Law account, because it's not, if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen, because shit happens. And so basically we always, told people to do that. And we generally would tell them to put it in a money market, because it's just like a checking account. They could write checks on it if they needed it. But something's going to happen always, and you don't want to have to dive into your profitability and your, and your other areas. So, but Coleen was pretty much talking about the same thing, I believe.
I was just going to expand on that a little bit, Coleen. We do also recommend, it really depends on each person's comfortability, right? Your comfort level. 3 to 6 months usually is what we recommend of operating expenses and payroll in that account, for exactly the reason that Coleen gave a ton of great reasons there. I will just say too, one of the things that I sometimes hear when I say the system is profit first, some people will bristle a little bit at the fact that you're putting profit over people, let's say. That's what they hear. And I just want to address that, because I think it's really important. Coleen said all the ways that profit actually helps people. And the only way Coleen was able to continue paying her employees through any of those things that she mentioned is because she was profitable. And so it's really not about profit above people. It's about making profit equal to people so that you have sustainable businesses long, long, long into the future, not just, today while you're generating revenue in your business, hoping that you have enough. So, it's things for yourself: maternity, paternity leave, vacations, taking care of sick people when you're sick in your business. Like I said, Coleen mentioned all the reasons, but having that 3 to 6 months, and the only way to get that is to be continuously profitable, right? If you have a couple of profitable months and then you have a couple of losing months, you use that profit. And so we want to make sure that you're always profitable and always adding to that buffer account.
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, I want to know how you handle the bad money policy addiction. I kind of call it an addiction, because when people are not handling their money properly and they're not paying themselves, they're not doing what you're talking about, which I ran into many, many times when I was financial planner. It's really tough. It's almost like an addiction where they can't break the bad habits, and they either take all the money and spend it, or Murphy's Law happens and then they're in a problem. And just real quick, I have a housekeeper that has that problem, and so I convinced her to let me create her Murphy's Law account for her. So when she works for me, I pay that money to an account that she can't get to. And then she calls me and says, oh, my air conditioner on my truck just broke. Instead of borrowing the money from somebody else or me or whatever, she's got her account. But I find it very difficult, because if she did it on her own, it wouldn't happen. So how do you overcome that?
Yeah. Well, those profit and tax accounts that I talked about, and I will say the profit account has some long-term savings built into it. We will take 50% out on a quarterly basis. We leave 50% in it for that, buffer, whatever account you want to call it. So it continues to grow for a long time. I put that at a separate bank. We don't have online banking access to it. We don't have checks for it. We don't have ATM cards for it. So they have to drive to the bank and get like a cashier's check. And again, it's kind of putting that buffer in, Carl, where like she has to call you to get it. And I tell people the whole time you're driving to the bank, you need to be thinking about, what is that account really for? And is this one of those instances? Is it the air conditioner's out on my building, so I have to use this money to take care of that, or I don't have enough to make payroll? And then it's, what are you going to do next month to make sure that you have enough for payroll and you're not continuously dipping into this account? And that's where because we work with clients on an ongoing basis, we see what's going on in those accounts, and we have some really hard conversations like, hey, so we play that accountability partner, sometimes after the fact, but sometimes for some of our clients, I will tell them, you have to call me when you're on the way to the bank to get that cashier's check. And we have to talk through, or you need to have an accountability buddy, some other business owner in your circle that you're calling on the way to the bank to get that cashier's check to run through that whole process. You're right. If they have access to it, they can just use it for whatever. We try to make it hard and make them think about what they're doing. And then sometimes we also address the underlying stuff, like that emotional stuff. What's happened before you were 6 to 8 years old that is still living in your body, that's still creating that mindset of, I can just run to the bank. I don't need to save this money. This is an emergency, whatever the thought process is. But we try to come at it from both perspectives, the practical system and then also the emotional mindset piece that's playing
I think
a part.
that's so important, Shannon, because I think there are multiple instances that come into play there. I think there are people who have maybe a scarcity mindset, but they feel like they can't handle having money. Every time they get money, they go spend it all, give it away, blow it because they're not worthy of it, instead of viewing it as a tool. And then I think also that there's some people that haven't figured out how to think ahead, how to plan ahead, who don't understand the value of a dollar. Now, I know when I had a house full of kiddos, actually it wasn't full, we only had 3, but just saying to my dad, look, we just don't have enough. We have more month at the end than we have at the end of the month than we have money. And my dad's saying, go find your leak. And I'm like, Dad, we literally don't do anything. I don't have a leak. And this was back in the day when we got paper statements. And so I sat down with my dad and went over my statement and realized that my leak was stepping inside gas stations. But I felt like it was so necessary. Like, I have to pay for the gas anyways. Maybe I'll just grab a drink, grab a snack for the kids. The gas station was right across the street from my house. And so that $7 gallon of milk 20 years ago, I mean, it was convenience. And so, and when we figured that out, it was like $300-400 a month. I quit stepping foot inside the gas stations and I hired a house cleaner instead. But it's finding the leak and being able to understand there's a problem and fix it. And I think it's the same with your mindset. If you feel like you're not worthy of money, maybe you don't even identify that. You just know that for whatever reason, when the money comes in, you feel like you have to spend it. Then you need to identify why you feel that way and be willing, for the sake and the success of your business, to address it and really build some new habits. Now, with our kids, one of the things we did as they became adults, and they're just starting out. We have a son who got married when he was 17, like they were young and they needed to borrow money. And so at that point, when they were young, we put money in a bank account and said, this is your revolving fund. If you borrow money out of it for any reason, you have to put it back in, and then it'll be available to you next time. But we're never going to put more than the $1,000 in there or whatever. So make sure you pay it back so the next time you need it, you can get it, right? And just teach them on that. As they got a little bit older and they understood our finances more, I remember my son coming and wanting to borrow money. And I said, son, I have 3 days left in the month and I've got $27. I don't have money to loan you. Yeah, but you have other money. You have the money for next month's bills. Let's take it out of that. And I'm like, I don't live like that. And so a lot of times it's showing your children and your employees the boundaries and how to live within those, how to build the habits that keep you inside the boundaries that protect you long term. When I'm looking at, can I survive or can I retire? I know I have to have X amount of money. And until I have that, I don't feel like I can slow down on what I'm doing. And I think it's a lot of that is mindset and really wanting to change, wanting to do things differently.
That's why I really encourage people to have some kind of conversation on their way to the bank, right? Because just having to process that out loud, you will hear what it is that's still living in your head, whether it's that I'm not worthy or I deserve, to be able to spend this money, whatever it is. You just don't hear it when you're focused on the music on the way to the bank, right? Or whatever else, the phone call that came in. But when you really sit and have that conversation on a regular basis, if you're doing it with somebody really good, they will reflect it back to you and you will hear it. And then it's all of a sudden like, oh. Most of the time, you really just need to understand what that is and be aware of it. Once you hear that, it's really easy to change it. But most people just don't even take the time to hear it, and therefore they can't change it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So let's give the audience a few things to think about. Let's talk about the 1%, why maybe it feels insignificant and what a difference that can actually make. Because I feel like everybody that's here could allocate 1% this week. If you're in the audience and you either on LinkedIn, YouTube, or here with us live, and you feel like you cannot allocate 1%, I want you to raise your hand and Shannon's going to connect with you and help you through this outside of this. So if you feel like you really can't allocate 1%, raise your hand or drop something in the chat, reach reach out to Shannon so she can help you through that. But Shannon, take it from there and tell us why that 1% can make a difference.
Yeah, it really is about habits. And once you start with one, like you're right, Coleen, everybody can do 1%. Everybody has grown their business in some way. Even if you're at, in your first month of business, if you have revenue and you didn't last month, your business has grown, right? And so the earlier we can start doing just 1%, you get in that habit. And honestly, that becomes the addiction. That's the addiction we want you to have, the addiction to putting 1% into that account and seeing that account grow. Because once you do 1%, you can do 2%. And then you get addicted to that and you're like, oh, well, now I can do 4 or 5%. So really just starting with that baby step of 1%. Like I said, all of our clients start there because that's the very thing. We don't have to do any analysis to figure out you can do 1%. So we start everybody there and then we figure out what they actually can do. But nobody stays at 1%. We get them off of that pretty quickly because they get hungry for it. They get addicted to doing that and seeing it grow. And I love, Coleen, that you're talking to your kids about this because that's the conversation we need. We need to be having this with brand new business owners and our young kids, because if we can get them addicted to seeing like that 4% interest deposit every month into your bank account, like I didn't do anything for that money. That's fun, right? And so that's why the 1% is where we start everybody. And just, it really does snowball. You've all heard of the debt snowball, and that's how you pay off debt, right? Starting with your smallest and working up from there. But starting with your smallest 1% that you're saving snowballs just as well.
All right. So you have a step-by-step checklist. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So it's called the Fiscal Fitness Success Kit. And you can get it at fitforprofit.com/foreplay. That is, and there's also a link to book a call if you want there. That checklist will walk you through what Coleen just talked about with the finding the leaks, right? We all have leaks in our business. And so that will help you identify where some of the links are or the leaks are in your business, and then help you figure out what your next step is from there, setting up this account so that you can, or all of these accounts, so that you can really drive that profitability sooner rather than later.
All right. I want to make sure I get this in the chat. fitforprofit.com/foreplay.
Yep.
All right. I'm going to drop that down here. I went to the link and it is there. So this is good. I love that. And I feel like this is so doable. I feel like finances have been scary for people for a really long time. And the best way to break through that is to actually talk, have those honest conversations, and then put yourself out there and try it. Just try it and see. And if you have questions or you need some hand-holding, reach out to Shannon and connect with her. Do we have any more questions or comments or ideas from anybody that they'd like to share? Things that have worked and haven't worked? Go ahead, Mike.
Back when I had one of those jobs, this was so easy to follow. Businesses don't always have the same steady cash flow. If you got a retail space with a certain amount of foot traffic, there's going to be some fluctuation, but you can count on a base amount. How about for when you're working solo and you're coaching and it's not so much steady income?
Yeah, that's actually one of the things I love about this system is I probably didn't mention this earlier. It's all based on percentages. And so really the whole goal of this system is to smooth out those huge peaks and those huge valleys that we experience as business owners, so that, Mike, when you have that, $50,000 month, you put the same percentages, 1%, into profit, and whatever the percentages are that you've determined for all the other accounts. And then the next month, when you're at, $10,000 or $20,000, you have the remaining $50,000 percentages left in those accounts. Obviously, this is presuming you don't spend it. So one of the things we do is we put our owners on salaries, right? So we figure out what your salary is from your business and you take the same amount. It doesn't matter whether you had a $50,000 month or a $10,000 month. Hopefully you have some $50,000 months first to get that buffer built up. And then when you have that $10,000 month, you have, like I said, the leftovers from allocating 30% into your owner's pay account when you had a $50,000 month, and you can still pay yourself. So that's really the goal. Same thing with like that annual expense account that I talked about. We want to allocate, or we put money into that account for all of our annual expenses every month so that they don't hit so hard. So we look at it both ways, from the revenue standpoint and the expense standpoint. And really that's our whole goal, is to smooth out those peaks and valleys so that it doesn't take such an emotional toll on you as the business owner.
Well, and I'm going to go on the other side of that and say, not only does it not take the emotional toll, but it builds confidence, and it gives you the freedom to show up and shine in your business without worrying about whether you open that app, is it going to open or not? Is it, just putting putting a system in place gives you the confidence that you need to keep showing up and to really focus on what you love in your business and not focus on the discouraging fact that you maybe had a slow month. But also, I will say that as you're building your business, and I've done this in all of my businesses, it takes a minute to realize. Let's just use Chicken Lips for an example. I knew in building Chicken Lips, so after I was open for 2 years, I knew when the slow times were in my business. And so one slow time was the beginning of September, the end of summer, when kids were going back to school. Moms were staying home and building out getting their homes back in order and things like that. So they weren't out shopping. So that was one slow time. Also, right after Christmas, everybody's already spent all their money. And so after Christmas was really slow. And so I created events in my business that would fill that gap. And after Christmas was the hard one. And so what we would do after Christmas is we would clearance everything out in our store and then close our store for a month. And I would take all of my employees out. This worked really well because it was like their Christmas bonus thing. I would take them on a trip shopping for the store, but they could also shop for themselves at the wholesale pricing. But I would take them out and we would shop for all new stuff for the store because I saved up all year and could do this. We'd stay in Airbnbs, dine out, all the things. We usually go down to Texas or Vegas. And then we would come back and reset the store and then do a re-grand opening on February 14th, just because that's the day we opened, which is odd enough. But that would bring in a whole new influx of people who want to see all the new stuff. And so setting up a system in your business that rotates, it's not going to look like that online, but setting up a system where you have your new thing that comes out when it's slow, or you have your annual sale, or you have your customer appreciation at a certain time, so that you're bringing in that influx to balance out when you're super slow or when you understand that you may have a slow month. That gives you confidence also because it does balance out the money. And it's just a part of being creative as a business owner and being able to see when you need to do those kinds of things. I want to go ahead and ask you some questions, Shannon. Are you ready for the hard questions?
Sure.
Alrighty. What's one thing everyone in the finance industry is doing that you think is complete bullshit, and why are they still doing it?
You used this word earlier, so I'm going to go with this one. I hate the word budget. The word budget doesn't usually work for most people. It's a piece of paper. And who references a piece of paper before they make a spending decision? Hardly anybody. That's why we use bank accounts. But that's what we've always done. And so that's why people are still doing it. But I call bullshit on budgets.
I like that. I know when you were saying you have to drive to the bank, for a while when I was learning to budget, for lack of a better word, I would freeze my credit cards.
Yeah.
And I know that doesn't work for some people because they memorize the numbers, but I got other things to memorize besides my credit card numbers. So I would just put them in a little silicone tray with water and freeze them. Then you have to.
If you can't figure out how to cut your expenses, cancel your credit card.
And you don't.
Your vendors will call you to get you to pay, and you can simply say no, thank you.
And you know what I always did in my businesses, and it would make my vendors so angry. And I understand more now as I got older, but I never did things on credit. And my vendors would say, well, you get 15% off if you do it on credit. And I'm like, yeah, but in 3 months when that comes due, I might be dead, or maybe I'll be out of business, or who knows where I'm going to be. So I don't do that. And that drove people crazy. And I see it now. I went to get tires and they wanted me to do them on credit. I'm like, no, I've got the cash. I'm paying cash. They took people on credit that were behind me in line and served them first. Mm-hmm. The interest means that much to them. And if it does, then it should mean that much to you as well.
Yep. Exactly.
Because it's like, no, we don't do interest that way. All right, next question. What's a mistake that you made that cost you serious money or time that you kept making anyway because you were too proud or too scared to admit that it wasn't working?
Ooh, that I kept doing anyways. That's a tough one. So I kind of hinted at the whole tax story earlier, that there was a time in my business where I couldn't pay my taxes. That was the shift for me. But that was about 5 years in. For 5 years, I kept telling all of my clients, you need to be saving 15 to 25% for taxes, and I was not doing it. And I don't know that it was stubborn, but the tax bill was the one that I was like, oh shit, I can't keep doing this anymore. Like, it did catch up to me. So yeah, saving for taxes is probably the one that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, and you're a professional and it caught up and bit you. So we can all expect it to catch up and bite us as well, right?
It will, for sure.
Okay, so if you could give only one piece of advice to somebody in the finance industry, but it would go completely against the grain, what would it be and why is it worth the backlash?
I think that's pretty much what we've talked about today. I mean, there are very few people in the finance industry that are really sitting down and talking with their clients about profitability. When you talk to most bookkeepers and accountants, all they are doing is looking at what has happened in the past, because that's what we are trained to do as bookkeepers and accountants, put together financial statements and tell you what has happened. And I really believe in the profit first system and setting up those bank accounts, paying yourself first and using your bank accounts. That's the thing. You can use your bank accounts to run your business without profit and loss statements. Most bookkeepers and accountants would curse me for saying that because they want you to have those statements and they're important. But once you have a system set up, you can use bank accounts to run your business. And that's how most of us are doing it anyways. Let's do it with the right bank accounts so that it actually serves you.
I love that. I love that. It looks like John has a question or a comment.
Sure, I'll throw something else out. Not so much a question, but using your bank accounts. Too many people get caught up in using their debit cards to run their bank accounts. And not that it's a terribly bad thing. However, with fraud being so rampant, if you have fraud in your bank account or your debit card, you're out real dollars. If you're using a credit card, you're out imaginary fake money. It's a lot easier to call American Express, say, hey, yeah, my card was compromised. They charge $1,000 of available credit. Could you please look into that and re-release it? But if it's your debit account, your checking account, and there's $1,000 gone, your bank may or may not replace that in the time you need to pay other bills. So never use your debit card unless you really need to. Try to avoid it whenever possible. And when using a credit card, always, always, always tap whenever possible, because that's the easiest way to not, or the best way to not get compromised, because it sends a token of your number, not your real number. And the same thing online. Never use your real number when you're shopping online. Let your bank create a virtual card for you that when you use online. And those are two big ways that you can also avoid getting hacked with your credit card. And if you're not doing it, every credit card you have, you should have notifications. If any card is ever used for a card not present, you should get notified immediately. This way, if you are hacked, you can mitigate the risk a lot faster than finding out 3 days later when you log into your bank. That's my TED Talk. Thanks for showing up.
I love that, John. And I'm going to say there's so much truth to that because when I had my boutique Chicken Lips, it was kind of a running thing with my bank and it would be no less than 5 times a year that my card was hacked. And I used my debit card online for everything. So this was not recent because I've been online now for 3 years and I was off for a couple of years. So at least 5 years ago. But what I did with my bank was I always had a backup card that hadn't been activated yet. And as soon as I would get an alert that something went through, if it was wrong, I would call my bank, cancel my card. They would work on that end. And then I would just activate the next card. They would send me another backup card. And this is no joke. Like I literally had running backup cards to fight this because it was so common happening like that.
Well, you should question where you're shopping that your card's getting, hacked.
Right.
So
but
often.
when you're right. But when you have a brick and mortar business and you're buying product for that, a lot of that is done through a platform. It's not Amazon, but there are a couple different ones, but they kind of work like that where they have a whole bunch of different sellers from different countries and they come to one platform online and you go to that platform and shop there. If you pick the wrong people or something happens, your card gets hacked. It's just a part of the game. And unfortunately, we didn't do tap and pay back then. And until you just said that, I never heard of having a virtual number. But my bank knows me well enough that they know to call and they know where I'm shopping. They actually got a call from them on a Saturday morning asking if I bought a $700 pair of boots. I'm like, well, I'm sure I bought a few of them in my life. And they're like, no, like today in Saudi Arabia. And I'm like, well, no, you called me at home, not today. So they were able to just stop that. But so important to make sure that we understand that and take advantage of that. I didn't know that about the tap and pay either. So that is great information. Shannon, do you want to close us out? Any last tip or advice you want to give us? And make sure you drop how people can connect with you in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Coleen. It was so great to be here with everybody. I mean, I just really encourage you to talk about money, right? Have a conversation with somebody about money today. I will drop the links to connect again in the chat. And just raising awareness around all of it will start to change the way you see money, and it will benefit you long term for sure.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Shannon. So this has been Monday Morning Business Foreplay. And if today's conversation has helped you see something differently, bless them, make one clearer decision or take one meaningful step forward, then this hour did exactly what it was designed to do, because clarity creates momentum and momentum beats motivation every time. Please remember that I am hosting my masterclass on Wednesday, August 5th at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. I am going to teach you how to simplify, automate, and delegate all within 90 minutes. Thank you, Shannon, for sharing your experience. We'll see you guys next week.